Welcome to Mojo Talks, where we explore the world through stories. I'm Mayur Channagere, visual storyteller and your host. Welcome to Mojo Talks with Mayur Channagere. And today's guest needs no introduction. He's a pioneer in shaping the IT landscape. He's a philanthropist. He's an author. But more than anything else, he's an inspiration and mentor to lots of us, including me. And this is an interview that I've been wanting to do even before the idea of Mojo Talks took shape. Subroto, thanks for joining us. I know it's a very short introduction, but there's a lot more to be said.
Yeah,
but thanks for doing this.
Thanks for the pressure. Right in the beginning.
No, so okay, in that case, then so the pressure is off. So, now I just want to kind of have a conversation. Like I said, this is something which I've been wanting to do for years. I remember meeting you about 10, 12 years ago. And this was during the rebranding of MindTree that happened. And that's when I first met you. But before I start, I want to start with something that you told me at Kalinga, at a Kalinga campus in Bhubaneswar. You said, dreams are only as good as the execution. It is easy to dream a dream. Only when we execute the dream, it becomes worthwhile. But what good is a dream if it is just a one individual's dream? True dreams are those which are hijacked by the dozen, hundreds, thousands of people, and then it becomes a dream. When I look at this quote, and when I look at everything that you've done, you live by it, whether it's MindTree, whether it's the philanthropy work that you do.
I actually came across a phrase called burden of dreams. Now, it's a very powerful phrase. If a dream is not a burden, it is not a dream. Okay. And we need to be able to feel the burden. And we need to walk with that burden on the shoulder. And that pushes us, that challenges us, that also deeply makes us to deeply question the dream. And in the process, you build affinity to the dream. And as I said before, the dream is only as good as its fulfillment. So that you externalize the value of the dream and you move on to the next dream. The second interesting thing is a phenomena called fulfillment. Okay. So if you look at all the successful services and products that are today available on the internet, when you look at them, a lot of us actually confuse the idea of fulfillment with something called the app. Yeah. Okay. So lots and lots of young people want to build an app, and they think that the app is what will make them rich and famous. It doesn't. The app is just a gateway.
Got it.
Okay. So building the app does not get you customers who will stay with you.
Yeah.
You have to actually create the entire fulfillment.
Yes.
That's how important it is to continuously obsess with the idea of fulfillment. Dream big, but fulfill even bigger.
At the core of it, you have always inspired people, and you have always believed in leading by example, right? But when it comes to MindTree, even when I remember walking into the simplest things, like when I walk into a restroom, the sticker there would say, wash up, clean up after you're done, because there's a human being doing it. At the core of it, it's always been that, isn't it? Why? Or what led to that?
It was very frustrating.
It is.
The interesting thing about MindTree was that we decided that people who are at the top, the founders and senior executives, nobody will have personal toilets.
Yes.
And what that actually meant was that MindTree was designed to be an egalitarian company. False sense of hierarchy was not in its DNA. You need a hierarchy, but only as much as is necessary to create value, but not for fulfilling somebody's ego. So we wanted to build MindTree as a community of communities and have a dominant heterarchy.
Okay.
As against a hierarchy. So the concept of hierarchy had to be demolished at many, many different levels, and one was the toilet. So when the toilets are for everybody and you go and use, then you actually are transported to a different reality. That reality hit me when I saw that people use the toilets mindlessly, and I'll not go into graphic details there. And they leave it behind for a human being to clean up.
They expect someone else to come and clean it.
Yeah, and it hurt me. I feel that it is an accident, and it is almost like a lottery of the womb, that one person becomes an IT engineer, another person becomes a janitor. If the janitor was born in a different womb, then that person could be, the IT engineer. So people come to become a janitor, okay, a security guard, because of compulsions. And at the level of the soul, that individual is as important, as consequential in the bigger scheme of things than you and I are. So yes, that person has to do his or her job, but the least we can do is to be considerate.
Correct.
So as I grew more frustrated, I realized that engineering education doesn't teach you how to use a toilet. But if you don't know how to use a toilet, you will not be a good engineer. So a series of things I kept doing. Okay. First, I put that sticker in front of the urinal, hoping that people actually read it as they're doing what they're doing. That sticker said, be careful, there's a human being who cleans up after you. It succeeded only that much. And then came a time that I realized that, however much messaging you do, it is not going to be enough in any human endeavor. So a time came when I actually started cleaning the floor of the toilet. And it scandalized people. So what I would do is I would take a chalk, and on the floor, wherever you saw the
mess,
saw the mess, then draw a circle around it. And so people come and see the circle and then say, oh my God, somebody has messed up before me. And sometimes I go clean up. And when that began to happen, people got the message. But even today, you go to an airport, okay? You go to anywhere where a clean public toilet is there, and I don't see my obligation to keep it clean. Next time you go to an airport, make eye contact with the janitor. Yes. It hurts me no end to see that the janitor has to be inside that place for 8 hours shift.
8 hours, yeah.
Okay. So place yourself in the shoe of that guy and say, if I was inside a toilet for 8 hours every day, because I have to send money home, okay, because that's where, I get my sustenance, then you have a very different worldview. So when you get inside, airport toilet, first make an eye contact, smile at that guy, do your work carefully, leave it in better shape than you found it, and then, say goodbye to that person. Maybe you can leave a tip for that person.
Even a smile, an acknowledgement, you can see the change in their face.
Yeah.
Subroto, that's been the culture. The non-existence of hierarchy has been the core of MindTree, and that's so visible, like not just the toilets, but I would see
everywhere.
You see leaders sitting in the cafeteria and having
Yeah.
lunch or snacks with the rest of them. But it didn't stop with MindTree, right? I mean, you could see that culture kind of go beyond many of MindTree minds. Even after they moved or they started their own startups or they became entrepreneurs, that culture kind of continued everywhere. Executing these things is one thing, but how do you make it part of the DNA? That's something which most of businesses, I wouldn't say startups, fail to do so. But how do you ingrain that as part of the DNA? Walk the talk is one thing, but then what do you do beyond that?
You can't do it in a paternalistic way.
Okay.
You can't push it top down, right? So as you said a little while ago, you have to do it by example.
Yeah.
And you need to actually repeatedly do it by example. Many of us actually try to do that, and then we concede.
Yeah.
And then we create frustration inside of us and say nothing can happen. So you have to be at it. Change takes time, okay? And people have to experience that change from deep within, and then they carry that forward, okay? So we can't just put a poster, a sticker, do a one-time job. Even that extends to parenting, okay?
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing is you need to actually touch a chord at the emotive level. I keep saying that the path to somebody's brain is through the heart. So touch somebody's heart, and you'll have no problem touching that person's brain. So how do you touch heart? You necessarily have to actually start with the emotive part.
Okay.
The heart doesn't actually register rationality. So we tend to have a dialogue with people purely at a rational level, or at least start with the rational level. Okay? We need to shift that. We are designed to actually engage both at an emotional level and at a rational level. So once you establish the emotion, then everything else falls into place. But in doing so, we have to be respectful to the other individual. As I said, you can't be paternalistic. Okay? So you need to extend that empathy before a communication will happen. And while you are communicating, you have to be in a position where you actually deeply respect and be ready for a dialogue. Be ready for, signs of differences of opinion. And maybe that individual has a higher truth. So you have to refine your position and continuously present yourself to be open. If you are not open, how can that person be open?
But Subroto, this is something which, when you have smaller teams, it's very easy to, embed that in the culture of the company. But as we grow, it becomes very difficult, isn't it? So there are actually two questions here that I have. One is...
Actually, before you ask me that question, it's a myth that when you become bigger, size becomes your enemy.
Okay.
I learned about this in a very fascinating way from Bangalore's noted architect Prem Chandvarkar. I have a huge respect for architects and people like Prem. So Prem once told me that there is a study that shows that if you have team sizes of more than 500, then communication breaks.
Okay.
So architecturally, let's say you are a company of 2,000 people. Okay? Don't pack 2,000 people in one building. Whenever you have a team size of, let's say, 500, okay, and you have actually got them in one building, think about another building. But it is not just about the physical entity. Okay? So each time it's about the interaction between people, it's about the communication that you do. So the issue here is fractalizing. So if you keep fractalizing, then you will not have anonymity. If you crack the problem of anonymity, you can scale, okay, without size becoming your enemy.
So here I have a rather operational question. Okay. So I agree that the minute you split the teams, the culture part of it is easy to manage and ingrain. But then operationally, if two entities who are working on a similar project, or maybe there is always correlationship between products and services, right? Would the distance make a difference? I mean, I know today we have all the tech but then still, that human connection is missing.
So I want to draw your attention to two things, which I have seen work, for me all my life. One is fractalized leadership.
Okay.
So I earlier talked about fractals. right? Fractals in how you actually create and demolish and recreate sizes that fit teams. But you also have to fractalize leadership. So if I'm taking on the burden of all the communication, then I become the bottleneck. So on key issues, MindTree was created, as a company of shared leadership.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not just my job. And a time comes where even the mission, vision, and values of the company can be explained by the security guard and the janitor and the team leader and the general manager and the vice president. So I'm consciously going bottoms up here in this example.
And that was so visible because I remember the security guard at the gate. I remember meeting him at first time. And then even after the change that happened, he, of course, progressed. And he was there for so long. And whether I speak to him or even the person who would come and make sure that we would have tea and water when we were shooting would have the same vibe.
Same energy field.
Same energy field.
Yeah. So then you are actually fractalizing. Okay. And once you have achieved that state, then that security guard is taking the charge of not only the next 10 security guards, but the 10 IT engineers, because the first contact to the organization is when you come to the turntile, is the security guard. The other interesting thing, Mayur, is values. Okay. When we build an organization, we need to understand the true role of values. I was greatly influenced by Peter Drucker. And he explained the idea of values very nicely. He said that Mother Nature actually figured out very early on what is the optimum number of times that a heart should beat.
Correct.
And once she figured that out, she kept that number constant between a human being and a monkey and a housefly. Similarly, she found out that for stable movement, we require what is called polar symmetry. What is common between you and me is we are symmetric at the poles.
Correct. And a lot of symmetry here also.
So once you have polar symmetry, then you have stability. So once she found out these ideas, these values, okay, of polar symmetry and number of times the heart must beat, she kept it constant. So she kept it constant so that around this constancy, she can spin and change everything else. So there are thousands and thousands and thousands of animals that she created. With one thing remaining constant, she changed everything. So what Peter Drucker says is that we as leaders have to deeply question as to what is the equivalent of the heartbeat and the polar symmetry in the organization. It is the values. So when you articulate the values and you live the values, then that gives the what is called the constancy of purpose. So you keep that constant and spin everything else around it. So if your values are stable, then what happens is that today you have one office, tomorrow you'll have 10 offices. Today you have one product or service, tomorrow you will have 50. Today you employ people of one nationality, tomorrow you may employ people of 10 nationalities. So each time you create, you spin, you create a change, unless your values are constant, then the organization will collapse under its own weight. Organizations seldom fail because of external reasons. Organizations fail because they can't handle their own weight.
So is that something that happened with your first startup?
Well, the first startup, which was a company called Project 21, it happened when I was 28. And there were 3 founders, me and 2 much older founders. And the failure did not come because of a clash of values necessarily, but the failure happened because we didn't have a shared vision. Okay. So the 3 founders, as we engaged, and we figured out as we went along had 3 different definitions of success.
Success. Correct.
So you look at your company and you telescope and say 5 years from now, what is the definition of success for founder A and B and C? So founder A may say that I'll feel successful if the company has gone public, which is valid, legitimate. Another person says, I will feel it's a success if we have created enormous wealth for ourselves. Okay, IPO or no IPO, that doesn't matter. And I need to be able to sell this company and move on to, to south of France and have a Lamborghini. Again, legitimate. Okay. But that may not be consistent with the first. Another founder may say that we are here to build a company for the next 50 years. We want to be a memorable company. We want to be a company that is connected, a company that has got shared wealth and has a social conscience. So all are legitimate, but you need to see the ability to harmonize. And if that is not possible, okay, if the definition of success for the founders is at variance, then it's a problem. The other very interesting thing is that you cannot discover this as you go along. Many of us do not front load this conversation in the time that the company is just an idea. People don't front load because they're uncomfortable that what will happen if there's disagreement, what will happen if we don't have shared vision of the future. And as a result, what happens, either the discussion doesn't happen, okay, or you have discomfort and then you pay a heavier price as you go along. So it's a very important thing I tell startups to ask each other all the uncomfortable questions right in the beginning. You can't resolve all of them, but then you at least know.
It's on the table.
It's on the table, okay? And your congratulations if you find that 8 out of 10 things you have resolved. One thing maybe you resolve as you go along, and one thing you can leave aside. But if you are on a discovery trip of ideas like vision and values, then there'll be surprises. Okay. And the surprises, more you postpone these conversations, greater is the possibility of negative surprise, and greater is the difficulty of recovering from it.
Awesome. So that actually interestingly leads to my next question. So our last guest that we had was Arjun Narayan, who was the founder MD of Catamaran. He spoke heavily about burnout because he went through it and his process of recovery. And the reason why I'm bringing this question of burnout and how you deal with it, each individual has his own way, is because you mentioned that one is if your idea succeeds, then it's easy to go. But then you have your ups and downs. That happened with your first startup. Then you started MindTree at the age of 40?
Yeah, I was about 40. Yeah.
40. How do you keep that momentum on, Subroto? That's a question that even I struggle with. You know, we have our ups and downs. We have our, the cyclicals, everything going on, emotional, physical, whatever. But how does one keep going?
It's a long conversation. I think the most important thing about concepts of burnout is the idea of a sense of purpose. In the beginning, you think you have a sense of purpose.
Correct.
And you don't revisit that. Okay? And a time comes when, unknown to yourself, your purpose is actually receding.
Yes.
And then everything is a torment. Everything is a toil. Okay? And the burnout begins. So I think, your purpose must be high at any point in time. What is purpose? I have an idea that I developed called platform and purpose, in which I said purpose is I to the power of T, which is impact you make over a period of time.
Okay.
So when you are driven by a sense of purpose, a sense of making impact over a period of time, you will find that, you will find your own pace. You will find your own energy. You will find your own sense of peace. and comfort with yourself. The other very important thing about burnout is health. And, if your health competes with you, you will go nowhere. So one needs to be very sensitive to that. You need to listen to your body every morning that you wake up. Your body should not burn out. And body burns out when you disrespect your body. You don't eat well, you don't exercise, you don't, practice inner calm. Okay. So I must give you an example. When MindTree started, the first thing that me and Sushmita, my wife, you know Sushmita very well,
Yes.
we went and we found a yoga teacher and started learning exactly the same time as MindTree happened. And that is one thing. Today, if you look back in time, it's 26 years it's been. And we have kept that constant. Okay.
Wow.
So it's just one example. Second thing is, I have never been indisciplined about the timing of my food. Okay. I'm a greedy guy. At least I was a greedy guy, being my mother's youngest child. Okay. And we used to always joke that MindTree, what kept the founders together was good food and cheap thrills. Okay. So good food was very important. And, that meant sneaking away and eating bhaji on the roadside and going and getting finding out which is the hole in the wall that gives you the best masala dosa or the best Uttar Kannada food and all that kind of stuff.
And that continues even now.
Yeah. But I never ate a meal which I was not paying attention to. And secondly, it was not on time. My breakfast, my lunch, my dinner, the time is non-negotiable. Once in a blue moon, you fool around with the time. But if you are, you are missing your breakfast, okay? If you are eating lunch without paying attention, you're on the phone and you're talking to somebody, you're grabbing the food with one hand and your phone on the other hand, you're basically disrespecting your body. Okay? And over time, it will actually wear out and you will have burnout. So one is purpose. The other is listening to your body because your body is carrying you. Okay. I think the third thing, which is very, very important, is to continuously calibrate yourself. Okay. And let me explain what I mean by that. So burnout, the other hidden word is frustration.
Yeah.
What burns you out? Your frustration burns you out. And what is frustration? Frustration is the delta between your ambition and your competence. Okay? So if you want to manage your frustration, either you will have to reduce your ambition or increase your competence. There's no other way to do it. Okay? So a lot of us do not do the introspection to say, so what is my ambition and what is my competence, right? We generally overinvest in the ambition and underinvest in the competence.
And competence would not necessarily mean your own competence, but building the team,
Yes,
building
yes,
the
you got it. You got it.
everything.
Yes.
And that's where you got to take the risk and say, if it means you're burning cash now, but let me build that team.
Yes.
Makes sense. I mean, automatically you're kind of delegating, you're distributing the work, everything is not falling on your shoulder. And as a founder, you are thinking more.
Yeah. But, very interesting you talk about burnout. And I'm not an authority on this subject, but it has many other angles to it. Right? Burnout happens when people don't deflect. If I keep everything inside of me, right, then I think that it is just me, myself, and I. I'm here to solve all the problems. I'm the one who must give all the answers, right? We must take time during the course of the day to deflect and say that there is a higher power. And by this, I don't mean religion. I don't mean godhood. Okay? The higher power could be an individual, could be an idea, could be a sense of being connected to the universe, right? So when we start deflecting, we are actually reducing our own burden. And we are accepting our own limitation that only so much is in my control. The other very interesting aspect of burnout is, candor. You should be able to unburden yourself. You should be able to make yourself vulnerable to somebody, right? And you should be able to actually to seek advice and to unburden yourself and tell it as it is. Nothing is more corrosive than keeping things to yourself.
But at times you might not want to offload your worries where your maternal or your paternal instinct kicks in. Like, I don't want them to go through, I don't want them to worry about it. Could be anyone, family, teams. So you kind of start internalizing it, isn't it?
Minimize that. Minimize that. But, that's why, great people talk about their lives being an open book. Okay. More open the book, more people will read it. Okay. And less you will have difficulty. And so I think you actually alluded to parenting. Okay. As a parent, how much should I actually take into confidence? How much should I make myself vulnerable?
Yeah.
One of the things that we did I'm not saying we're the best parents in the world, but one of the things that Sushmita and I decided very early on is we'll not treat our children as small people, okay, a smaller version of us. We'll not treat them as people who can't understand, don't know. So from the time that your child is maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years old, treat that child as an equal. Okay. Then you will find that you really don't have to hold off things. Yes, sometimes, you need to choose, and you don't want to actually, you don't want to share everything because you think that will it actually be counterproductive. That's a call you have to take. So it is all about, how much should you communicate?
Correct.
And in MindTree, again, we had this principle called 90-90-90. What that meant is 90% of people should have access to 90% of all information, okay? 90% of the time. Wow. So 90% of people, 90% of all the information, and 90% of the time. The rest is need to know. Okay?
And that...
So that principle applies to your personal life as well.
True.
Okay. So follow the 90-90-90 principle, and then you don't have to worry about these things.
I mean, I'll be very honest, this was not part of the questions that I had in mind, but...
So you don't have to have all questions in your mind all the time. Okay. They say that a good conversation is one where 40% of the time you are speaking, 40% of the time I'm speaking, and 20% of the time nobody's speaking. So it is in that period of silence, which we can't afford in this podcast, but in that period of silence, new questions emerge. And those are those interesting questions. True. Those are the questions that will actually determine the flow. So we should not over-prepare. We should be very prepared, but we should actually keep the window open for contingency, keep the window open for destiny, keep the window open for what I call emergence.
On that thing about you're talking about finding time, sharing, not many people are aware, apart from select few, about you being a photographer.
Oh, actually, you must be joking. No. You are the photographer. I only, sometimes carry a camera to show off, and it's a nice toy to have. So, everybody's a photographer these days. That's what the digital revolution has done. The camera is made access to technology and capability such. Everybody is taking millions of photographs. So yeah. I will not call myself a photographer, the way that...
I beg to differ because so the way I got to know was I was waiting to meet you And outside your office, there were a stack of frames kept of photographs that you had taken, which were framed, and they were actually auctioned off, if I remember right, as part of the MindTree Foundation initiative. And I was just casually flipping through, and later is when I got to know that those were pictures taken by you. And see, everyone's a photographer, absolutely, right? And the way I see it is, it's a medium of expression for me. We were talking about taking time out. Some people write, some people talk, some people sing. For me, it's photography. It's like, I just need the camera, not to tell the world that I took this, but it's more of self-internalization. Right? What do you do? How do you, I know you write, you have a packed schedule. How does Subroto take a break?
This story draws me to a photograph.
Okay.
So, and the story is everywhere, right? I'll give you a couple of examples. So one day I was driving from Bangalore airport through the back road to Whitefield. And suddenly in the middle of a hamlet, I find a hole in the wall, which is a barber shop. And the guy has a signboard that says, online saloon. Okay. Now, I think it's so uplifting. It's so hilarious. Of course, you and me will always look at barber shops in a different way, with a tinge of jealousy. But no, this has to happen only in Bangalore, where the barber says online. Okay, so I think we are still further away, where a robo will give us the haircut and you can do it virtually. So actually, the barber shop is offline. Okay, but the signboard says online. I love it. So I pause and I take a photograph of that. During the lockdown period, right? I was the chief spokesperson of the government of Odisha on COVID-19, and I used to go around to see how the whole implementation is going and things like that. Then in the middle of, again, nowhere, by the roadside of the national highway, I see a small eatery that has come up. And because people need to eat food, right? Yeah. You can't get away from that. But predictably, the eatery was closed because you also, it's lockdown time. And I'm sure there's another entrance through which the food gets delivered, distributed, whatever it is. But the name of that eatery was Virus. Now, imagine that a guy. Okay, so he is not some Einstein, or he is not some phenomenal great industrialist or businessman or businesswoman. That guy, man, woman, whatever, has chosen a name called Virus. Okay, so. Whether it is that, or you suddenly are in front of a banyan tree, the big banyan tree, or you're looking at the rocks of Ramnagaram, okay, or you're looking at a small creature. Okay. One of the pictures that I took was a lone crab. Okay, the lighting was dark, sun was rapidly going down, and this was on the Pacific coast. Okay, and there was a lone crab that is actually positioned itself on a rock. So you have black rock, you have black crab, and the fading sunlight behind. And you say, so this crab has a story. Where did this crab come from? Okay, where is the crab going? Right. So the story in the photograph moves me. Whether it is a big banyan tree, the stone of Ramnagaram, I have collected a few black and white pictures, not a whole lot, but few. And some of my collection is on Mother Teresa.
Yes.
Okay. And you see her in deep reflection. You see her in innocence. Sometimes she laughs. Sometimes she's carrying a baby. Sometimes she's actually praying. And in each of those, there are stories, not just her story, but stories of her, thousands of nuns, stories of what they do every day.
Yeah.
When I see those pictures, I see those stories.
And I remember, so the first time we actually came to MindTree Kalinga, which was still, I think the construction was still going on. And the only brief I got a call from Kiran, said, Subroto wants you to come there and take pictures.
Kiran, who was a key part of our marketing team at that time. Yeah.
Yes. And
Kiran Mohan.
Kiran Mohan,
yeah,
yes.
Good guy.
Fabulous. Yeah. I'm still in touch with him. So he said, Subroto wants you to come there to take pictures. What? Nothing. What kind of images? Are we talking studio? Are we talking about? Nothing was given. So we lugged the studio equipment, we lugged the lights, cameras, everything. We lined up there. And you gave me a one-line brief. I still remember we were standing in the office, the makeshift office, and you just showed me the campus and said, Mayur, this is your canvas. Paint it. And we spent the next day or two shooting. And then when I showed you the pictures and I asked you a question, anyone could have taken these pictures. Even a local photographer could have taken. Why did you have to spend so much to get someone? You made a statement that kind of changed the way I see taking photographs after that. You said, you can take a photograph or you can take a picture for posterity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that is what you expected me to do.
Yeah.
And that has become the foundation for our team today.
Yep.
We just don't take photographs. It's like, okay, don't look at now. Look at 10 years from now. There's going to be there's going to be different narrative.
Yep.
There's going to be...
Yep.
And I see where that comes from. The very reason that you take pictures, or when you spoke about Mother Teresa, is that today, when you look at those images, you connect at a different level.
Mm-hmm.
You personalize it, right? And that's what photographs...
There is photography, but I want to pull back and talk about my, interaction with you. So, first of all, I disagree with you that I could have hired any local photographer and taken the pictures. Why pay that, differential price to get somebody like Mayur? But without even going to that, we need to be deeply respectful with professionals that we engage. Now, we find that respect very easy if you go with you suddenly have a pain on your left side and you go to Dr. Devi Shetty, okay, and you don't discuss what kind of surgery he needs to do. Of course, he, being Dr. Devi Shetty, will always explain to you your options.
Yes.
But, you go to Dr. Devi Shetty, you don't tell him how to do the surgery.
True.
I'm fascinated with doctors and surgeons in particular. And I have seen heart surgeries real time inside an OT. I have seen brain surgery. I have seen knee replacement, only to see how it happens. And so when you go to a brain surgeon, okay, and a brain surgery is happening, there's zero chance that you know what's going on.
Yeah.
So you surrender. You give yourself. What is the choice you make? You go to the right doctor.
Yeah.
After that, you don't bullshit. You don't say, take the picture from this angle. Okay. Take that picture. So, what did Kiran do? I said, Kiran, we need to actually create a photographic history of MindTree Kalinga campus in the making.
Good.
Because that will get forgotten.
True.
That is what we leave behind for posterity. Not to beat our chest, but to tell them this is the benchmark. You don't tell Mayur how to take pictures. Then you say, Mayur, you're the surgeon. You're the brain surgeon. You're the heart surgeon. So please take over my life and play. And beautiful things will come up. This is not a guarantee that each time it will succeed.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but our job is not to play cautious on key things in life. Our job is to find the right person and trust intuition.
Yeah.
Okay. Data doesn't say everything. So look at the vibes. Look at the smell test. Okay. And if you think that you got the right person, then don't do backseat driving. 2 times out of 10 you will fail, but 8 times out of 10, you will get memorable things, which exceed the brief. The beauty of working with you was that you always went beyond the brief.
I guess so. That means a lot. In our conversation, whether today or otherwise, you always keep going back to giving analogies to doctors. And another thing that you also shared during many of our conversations was, one thing you said is, yeah, you have your commercial work, you have all the money making to survive, but do look at philanthropy. And when I go back and listen to in my head, if I listen to the conversation that we had, it all ties down to finding the purpose, finding the peace. In one of your interviews, again, you spoke about why you are drawn to the doctors, the medicine, given your grandfather was a doctor and so on and so forth. But then I'm about to ask you a question. You're most welcome not to answer that. Was there a personal experience in the family that led you to support the initiatives that you're supporting today? Mental health, be it palliative care, be it the hospital at ISC. I'm sure we all are products of our experience. There's something that has hit us somewhere during our lifetime. And somewhere we said, okay, it's maybe need to fix it or support that. Was there something that happened?
So let me actually again pull back and pick on this word called philanthropy that you used. So people actually falsely equate philanthropy with bundles of money.
True.
That's not philanthropy.
Yeah.
To understand what philanthropy is, we need to look at the meaning of that word. The word comes as a conjunction of 2 words. Okay. If you look at the origin of the word, it starts with a word called philion and anthropy. Okay. Philion, like filial. We talk about, filial between people, right?
Yes.
And anthropy is human beings, anthropology. So philanthropy essentially is about filial feelings for other human beings. What that really means is the word philanthropy at its core, it means love for human beings. Okay. So you have to love human beings because you're not alone on this planet. Now the question is, how many ways you can love? There are many, many ways you can love. And there's endless ways in which you can love the other human being. Sometimes the cause stems from deprivation, denial, a negative memory. Okay. So for example, my father had a severe mental health issue. My mother became blind, when she was in her 50s, and she lived till, her 80s, more than 80s. So she became completely blind. Now, I never had cancer in my family, my immediate family. Sushmita's mother had cancer. Okay. Though she recovered, and there were other things that set in, and we saw her actually walk into her sunset with fair amount of problem for herself that she had to deal with, and helplessness that people around her had. So yes, all these things will shape, but they need not be all the things, right? The ways that you can love a human being can be many. The other thing that we need to look at is, what is the responsibility that we have? Now, people say, why health? Right? It could be anything else. We chose health. It is because we felt that for a country of 1.5 billion people, we talk about India becoming a developed country. If you look at the health infrastructure and the health delivery system in the country, we are actually inferior to many sub-Saharan, countries.
True.
Some of our practices are inferior to other, lesser developing countries. So we have a long, long way to go. Forget about countries like, countries like, North America, countries, the Nordic countries, Singapore, Hong Kong, which has benchmarks for health delivery system.
Correct.
So we have long way to go. Now, in that, the question is, can we outsource everything to the government? We have to take charge. We have to actually do our bit. So Susmita and I felt that we should actually devote our whatever resources we have and some of our expertise, because this is a very deep subject. We can't bring all the expertise that are required there. So some of our expertise and some of our resources in our lifetime to make a little difference, so that we're not leaving everything to government. We have to work in a symbiotic way. So that is the short answer to your question.
You're right. I mean, we can't, whether it's the roads, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's hygiene, whether it's healthcare, education, our natural responses when something is not working is saying the government is not working. I think it's about time we take charge.
You don't take charge, you engage.
Engage.
You engage in a constructive way. So, nobody loves government anywhere in the world. Okay? Government is a necessary evil, right? But you and I are here today because there's government and it works.
Yes.
The government is running the electricity, okay, providing 24/7 electricity.
Correct.
With which we're doing the recording. The government is giving the guarantee of right to property. So that's how we have rented this studio. And people are not barging in through the door saying that this is my place, what are you doing here? It's a contract system at work. The government is working because despite Bangalore's traffic, I started at 8 o'clock in Whitefield and I reached your studio at 9:03. Okay? And there was a policeman at literally, all the major junctions who's standing there inhaling carbon monoxide, because the government, not you and me, government has given a job and job security to that person. So that person has got up in the morning, donned the uniform and is standing there. So we need to actually appreciate government for what it does. COVID-19 was not managed by Fortune 500 companies.
True.
Okay? They couldn't have managed COVID. COVID was managed because the government sprang into action.
Yeah.
I was at a conference and I watched a person from an NGO venting, okay, against the government. He went on and on and on. She was actually standing to ask a question to the panel, but like all Indians, we tell a whole story and not
Come
not
to the
come
point.
question. So his story was, he was beating government. He did it for 5-6 minutes. And I was also in the audience. So then I stopped the guy. It's not my usual style to jump in where you're not needed. And I said, I have a question for you. So I said to him, it was a skill development conference actually. So I asked a question. I said, tell me, who gave you your first vaccine, your shot? So it was dead silence, and the guy was actually quite angry, and he said, what's the relevance of that question? I said, the relevance is that first vaccine that you had, and the second and the third, okay, your BCG, your TABC, your cholera inoculation, okay, was actually given by a government which didn't charge you a penny for that, and hasn't come and asked for royalty on all your successes. Without those shots that you had as a baby, you would be standing here asking these profound questions and making this whole lecture and becoming virulent about the government. You are standing here because as a baby, a government came and, with its anonymity and abstraction and made that vaccine available to you. You don't forget that. And by the way, I was born at home, and because there's no hospitals around. Even today, 10% of babies are born. 66,000 babies are born every day in India, and of that 10% are still born non-institutionally. They're born at home. But 90% of babies today are born, and they're not born in birthing centers. They're born in government hospitals. So where would this entire country go if the government was not there? So we need to respect, we need to engage. Okay. Of course, we need to demand accountability, right?
Correct.
But we can't outsource nation building. You can't outsource building social character.
Yeah. Subroto, I know you've always been a strong supporter of public-private partnership, and you've been that. But how was the switchover for you? I know it's been asked, but I'm still curious to know, because it's not very easy to come from a very organized, structured way of working to the, I wouldn't say advocacy, but there's
Fluidity.
Right? There's a lot of fluidity. How difficult was it?
It wasn't difficult. First of all, it happened in an unplanned way. I stepped down from MindTree on 31st March 2016. On, a pre-commitment was that I would deliver a talk to the bureaucrats in the government of Odisha on the occasion of the 80th year of the birth of Odisha as a linguistically organized state. And it was the 100th year of Biju Patnaik's birth, so it's his birth centenary. So on that platform, to celebrate both these two things, there's something called the Odisha Knowledge Hub. And it's a forum where all the top bureaucrats come and they listen to somebody from outside. The idea is to learn from unusual sources. So that particular edition of Odisha Knowledge Hub, I was the speaker. 2nd of April, this was happening. I didn't know that the Chief Minister of the state is listening in from his room via a live feed. And on 4th of April, he called and said, please come and work with us. So it was an act of faith. It was an act of listening to an emergent voice of the future. There's not too much of rationality in it. What fascinates me is the idea of crossing over. So I was crossing over. So I was a crossover in that moment. So you look at Nandan Nilekani. Okay, he was a crossover.
Correct.
Spent his entire life building a company, being an entrepreneur, a leader from the private sector, a technology beacon, to joining the government to build the Aadhaar platform.
Yeah.
So crossing over is fascinating. And once you are a crossover, then you burn bridges. Then you are not looking at the safety net.
Yeah.
Then you are a trapeze artist that is focused on the rope, okay, not on falling. Right? So you make it work. So when I joined the government, I actually joined with my eyes wide open. Number one. Number two, I joined with total respect for government. Okay? Because every organization, whether it's private sector or public sector, has a soul.
Yeah.
And that soul actually listens to your voice. So if you're partially committed, if you come with I know more than you do kind of approach, then that soul does not open itself fully to you. So you have to accept a system in its totality, and you need to connect at the level of a soul, and then it rises. It makes all its energy and resources available to you. Okay. So those 8 years that I spent working with the government were actually the best years of my life.
I can just imagine.
Yeah, and I told somebody, very early on who wanted to know about the experience, and I said that I would not trade these 8 years for the 40 very successful years that I had in the information technology industry.
And in the span of 8 years, Subroto, I don't want to get into the bureaucracy part of it or the structural part of it. What I'm more interested to hear is the stories that you have come across.
I'm not going to tell you all that in this limited podcast, but I'll actually let you in on something I have not talked about so far. I signed a book deal with Penguin, and this book is in the making. It will make its debut sometime, probably in the month of June. And that book actually will tell you the stories, not just my story, but stories of literally, dozens and dozens of people at the bottom of the pyramid, their act of valor, their act of struggle, their act of leadership, their act of crossing over.
Wow.
And I was witness to all that. So every day I learned something which I didn't know before working with the government. It's a huge learning process. And every day I met heroes, okay? And I learned a lot. So all that will be told. So wait for June. So buy the book, watch out.
What's the book called? Or we'll wait.
Yes.
We'll wait. Okay. Awesome, Subroto. I mean, there's a lot more questions that I have, things that I want to ask.
Probably another day.
For another episode, hopefully soon.
And actually, I should be the one who's interviewing, not getting interviewed, because I came to the podcast because I have very deep admiration for your sense of purpose. You engage, you have deep respect for the medium, you have deep respect for your equipment talks to you, you talk to your equipment, your people talk to you, you talk to your people. You have affection, infectious affection for your clients, and then your clients actually rise up to that. And you are a great example of listening and collaboration. So I have admired your work beyond saying that, oh, you're a great photographer, right? So given that, someday maybe I will sit across on that chair and you will be here and we'll talk about the making of Mayur or the dance of the Mayur.
Thank you, Subroto. On that note, I just want to, I don't want to say I want to wrap up this episode, but it was an episode that I've been hoping to do for such a long time. I wouldn't say episode, a discussion with Subroto that I've been wanting to record for a long time. I hope you found your mojo and inspiration through this. Thanks for listening. This is Mayur Channagere signing off.